The Valorian Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They had conquered hundreds of species across the galaxy. They had destroyed entire civilizations and turned proud warriors into slaves. In all that time, no one had ever defeated them. No one had ever made them afraid. When their scouts discovered Earth, a small blue planet spinning around an ordinary yellow star, they saw nothing special. Just another world full of primitive creatures waiting to be conquered. The Valorians did not bother to study humans. They did not try to understand them. They simply decided to take what they wanted. The attack came on a Tuesday morning in spring. General Victoria Grant was eating breakfast in her apartment in Washington when the first reports came through. Strange objects had appeared in the sky over every major city on Earth. At first, people thought they were meteors. Then the objects stopped moving and hung in the air like dark clouds made of metal. Within minutes, the bombardment began. Victoria watched the news footage with growing horror. Beams of blue light fell from the alien ships and turned everything they touched into fire and ash. Buildings that had stood for centuries vanished in seconds. Entire neighborhoods simply ceased to exist. The cameras showed people running through the streets, screaming, trying to escape something that could not be escaped. Chicago was hit first, then New York, then Los Angeles. The aliens moved from city to city with terrible efficiency, burning everything in their path. They did not send any messages. They did not make any demands. They just killed. Victoria was a soldier. She had served her country for 25 years. She had seen combat in 3 different wars. But nothing had prepared her for this. Nothing could prepare anyone for watching their world die. She grabbed her phone and called the Pentagon. The line was dead. She tried again and again until finally someone answered. It was Lieutenant Kevin Palmer, a young officer she had worked with before. "General Grant," he said, his voice shaking. "Thank God. We've been trying to reach all surviving command staff. The President is dead. So is the Vice President, the Secretary of Defense, most of the Joint Chiefs. The chain of command is broken." Victoria closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, the fear was gone. In its place was something cold and hard. "Where do you need me?" she asked. 3 days later, Victoria stood in the ruins of Chicago. The fires had finally stopped burning, but smoke still rose from the wreckage in thick gray columns. The air smelled like ash and death. Nothing moved except the rescue teams searching through the rubble for survivors. Kevin walked beside her, reading from a tablet that showed the latest casualty reports. "We've confirmed 14 million dead in North America," he said quietly. "Europe is reporting similar numbers. Asia is worse. The global death toll is somewhere around 200 million, but that number keeps climbing. 200 million people, gone in less than a day." Victoria tried to imagine that number and failed. It was too big, too terrible. "Where are the aliens now?" she asked. "Their fleet has moved into orbit around the moon. Our satellites are tracking them. It looks like they're waiting for something." "Reinforcements," Victoria said. "Ground troops. They've finished bombing us. Now they want to occupy what's left." She looked around at the destroyed city. Twisted metal and broken concrete stretched in every direction as far as she could see. Somewhere beneath all that rubble were millions of bodies that would never be recovered. Families that would never be buried. Lives that would never be lived. The Valorians had done this without warning, without reason, without mercy. They had treated humanity like insects to be stepped on. Victoria felt something growing inside her chest. It was not grief, though she had plenty of that. It was not fear, though any sane person would be afraid. It was anger. Pure, burning anger that spread through her body like fire through dry wood. "They made a mistake," she said softly. Kevin looked at her with confusion. "General? They hit us hard, but not hard enough. They killed millions, but billions are still alive. They destroyed our cities, but not our factories, not our military bases, not our will to fight. Victoria turned to face her aide. They think we're broken. They think we'll surrender. They have no idea what they've started. General, with respect, how can we fight them? Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. Their weapons can destroy cities in minutes. We don't have anything that can touch them. Victoria smiled, and there was no warmth in it. Not yet. But we're fast learners, and we have something they've never faced before. What's that? A reason to fight. Every person who lost someone in this attack. Every survivor who crawled out of the rubble. Every human being on this planet now has a reason to fight until their last breath. She looked up at the gray sky, knowing the enemy was somewhere beyond it. They wanted to conquer us quickly and move on to the next target. Instead, they've given us something to unite around. They've made every man, woman, and child on Earth their enemy. That night, Victoria held a secure video conference with military leaders from around the world. Generals from Russia, China, Europe, and dozens of other nations appeared on her screen. Old rivalries and political differences meant nothing now. They had all lost the same things. They all wanted the same thing in return. We need to work together, Victoria told them. Share everything we have: technology, intelligence, resources, soldiers. The old boundaries between our countries don't matter anymore. We are all humans now, and that is the only thing that matters. One by one, the other leaders agreed. For the first time in history, the entire human race was united under a single purpose. Victoria ended the call and sat alone in the darkness of her makeshift command center. Outside, the wind blew through the ruins of what had once been a great city. Somewhere in the distance, a dog was barking. Life continued, even in the shadow of death. She pulled out a photograph from her pocket. It showed a young woman with dark hair and a bright smile. Her daughter, Lisa. She had been in New York when the attack came. There had been no survivors. Victoria looked at the photograph for a long time. Then she put it away and began planning humanity's response. The Valorians had come to Earth expecting easy prey. They had found something else entirely. They had awakened a sleeping giant, and that giant was very, very angry. The war for survival had begun. 3 months had passed since the day the sky burned. The Valorians had landed their ground forces in 12 locations around the world. Massive fortress complexes now stood where human cities had once been. Inside those fortresses, the aliens prepared for what they believed would be an easy occupation. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a bunker that had been built to survive nuclear war, General Victoria Grant addressed the leaders of what remained of Earth's military. Representatives from 47 nations sat before her. Their faces showed the marks of grief and exhaustion, but also something else: determination, hunger for revenge. Our enemy believes the war is over, Victoria began. Their reports describe humans as primitive and weak. They expect us to surrender within 6 months. She paused and looked across the room. They have made a terrible mistake. They do not understand what they are dealing with. Colonel Daniel Morrison stood up from his seat. He was a Marine, a big man with scars on his face and fire in his eyes. General, we've been studying the Valorian technology we captured during the initial attacks. Dr. Laura Bennett and her team have made incredible progress. Their weapons are advanced, but they're not magic. We can understand them, we can copy them, and we can improve them. Tell me more, Victoria said. Morrison nodded to a woman sitting nearby. Dr. Bennett was small and quiet, with glasses and messy hair. She looked like she had not slept in weeks. She probably had not. The Valorian shield generators use a principle we had theorized about but never achieved, Dr. Bennett explained. But now that we have working examples, we've figured out how they work. Better yet, we've found ways to make them stronger. Give us 6 more months and we'll have shields that can stop their weapons." Another man stood up. Dr. Christopher Walsh was the head of a new department that studied alien biology. "We've also learned a great deal about the Valorians themselves," he said. "They're stronger than us, faster, more durable. In a straight fight, one Valorian soldier can kill 10 humans." "That sounds like bad news," someone muttered. "Let me finish," Walsh said. "They have weaknesses. Their lungs are sensitive to certain chemicals that are common on Earth. Tear gas affects them badly. So do some pesticides. Their nervous systems are vulnerable to specific electromagnetic frequencies. We're developing weapons that target these weaknesses." He paused. "And there's one more thing. They heal very slowly. Wounds that would kill a human can be survived by a Valorian, but it takes them months to recover. If we hurt them, they stay hurt." Victoria nodded slowly. "So we can fight them. We can hurt them. But we need more than that. We need to win." "That brings me to our biggest project," Morrison said. He pressed a button, and a holographic image appeared in the center of the room. It showed a massive structure being built underground in Antarctica. "We're calling it Project Phoenix. Using captured Valorian technology and our own engineering, we're building warships, real warships that can fly between stars." The room went silent. Everyone stared at the hologram. "How is that possible?" asked a Russian general. "We've never built anything like that before." "We learn fast," Morrison replied. "Especially when our survival depends on it. The first ship will be ready in 9 months. We're planning to build 12 in total." Victoria felt something she had not felt since the attack. Hope. Small and fragile, but real. Over the following months, humanity worked with desperate speed. Underground factories ran day and night, producing weapons and equipment. Scientists solved problems in weeks that would normally take decades. Every person on Earth contributed in whatever way they could. The old divisions between nations had vanished. There were no more Americans or Russians or Chinese. There were only humans, and they were all fighting for the same thing. Meanwhile, resistance cells began striking at the Valorian occupation forces. Small attacks at first. A patrol ambushed here, a supply convoy destroyed there. The aliens responded with brutal force, killing anyone they suspected of helping the resistance. But for every fighter they killed, 2 more took their place. Victoria traveled constantly, visiting resistance groups and military units around the world. She saw things that broke her heart and things that filled her with pride. She saw humans die fighting enemies they could not defeat, buying time for others to escape. She saw scientists working until they collapsed, then getting up and working some more. She saw ordinary people performing extraordinary acts of courage. One night, she visited a hospital where wounded resistance fighters were being treated. A young man was lying in one of the beds. Both his legs had been blown off by a Valorian weapon. He was maybe 20 years old. "General Grant," he said when he saw her. "It's an honor." "The honor is mine," Victoria replied. "What's your name, soldier?" "Private Ben Cooper, ma'am, 3rd Resistance Brigade." "What happened to you, Private Cooper?" The young man smiled despite his pain. "We attacked a Valorian patrol, killed 3 of them before they got me. Worth it." Victoria looked at his ruined legs. "You've given so much. How can you say it was worth it?" "Because they're afraid now," Cooper said. "I saw it in their eyes before they shot me. They didn't expect us to fight. They didn't expect us to hurt them. Every time we attack, they get a little more afraid." He reached out and gripped her hand with surprising strength. "We're going to win, General. I know it. We're going to make them pay for what they did." Victoria squeezed his hand back. "Yes," she said. "We are." She left the hospital that night with renewed determination. Private Cooper was right. The Valorians were afraid. They had expected a quick conquest, and instead found themselves in a war they did not understand. A war against an enemy that refused to surrender. an enemy that learned from every defeat and came back stronger. In her pocket, Victoria carried the photograph of her daughter. She took it out sometimes and looked at it, reminding herself why she was fighting. Lisa would never see the victory that was coming. But she would be avenged. Every human who had died in the attack would be avenged. 9 months later, Victoria stood in the Antarctic base and watched as the first human starship rose from its construction bay. It was called the Defiance, and it was beautiful in a deadly way. All sharp angles and hidden weapons, built by human hands using stolen alien technology. "It's ready," Morrison said beside her. "All 12 ships. The fleet is complete." Victoria looked at the warship that represented humanity's answer to the Valorian Dominion. They were still outnumbered, still outgunned, but they were no longer helpless. "Then it's time," she said. "Time to show them what happens when you attack Earth." The gathering storm was about to break. 1 year had passed since the Valorians came to Earth. 1 year of death and destruction. 1 year of grief and rage. 1 year of preparation. Now it was time for payback. General Victoria Grant stood on the bridge of the Defiance, humanity's first starship. Around her, officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. Every person on board knew what was at stake. Every person had lost someone in the attack. They were not just soldiers anymore. They were survivors, and they had come to even the score. Commander Amanda Cole sat in the captain's chair, her fingers dancing over the control panel. She was young for such an important position, only 32 years old, but she had proven herself 100 times over during the resistance. She had led more successful raids against Valorian forces than anyone else alive. "All systems ready, General," Cole reported. "The fleet is in position." Victoria looked at the tactical display showing their 12 ships floating in the darkness of space. 12 vessels against the Valorian garrison that orbited the moon. By any logical measure, it was suicide. The aliens had over 50 warships guarding their lunar base. Their technology was still superior in many ways, but humans had something the Valorians did not. They had rage. They had the memory of 200 million dead. They had absolutely nothing left to lose. "Signal the fleet," Victoria ordered. "Operation Counterpunch begins now." The human ships activated their cloaking devices. These were not the same cloaking systems the Valorians used. Human scientists had studied the alien technology and improved it. Where Valorian ships became difficult to detect, human ships became invisible. They moved toward the moon like ghosts, passing through the enemy patrol lines without being noticed. The Valorians had no idea death was coming for them. The first warning the aliens received was when the Defiance decloaked directly behind their flagship and fired everything it had. Missiles and energy beams tore into the massive Valorian vessel before its shields could activate. The ship exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the darkness of space. Then the other human ships appeared, each one choosing a target and attacking with devastating fury. The Valorians scrambled to respond, but they were confused and disorganized. They had never faced an enemy that could strike from nowhere. They had never fought anyone who attacked with such reckless aggression. Victoria watched the battle unfold on the tactical display. Red dots representing Valorian ships winked out one by one as human weapons found their marks. But green dots were disappearing too. The enemy was fighting back now, their superior numbers starting to tell. "We've lost the courage," an officer reported. "The Valor is badly damaged. The Spirit is reporting heavy casualties." "Keep fighting," Victoria ordered. "Pour everything into them." The battle lasted 4 hours. 4 hours of explosions and death. 4 hours of desperate combat in the cold void between Earth and its moon. When it was finally over, 3 human ships had been destroyed, and 5 more were heavily damaged. But every single Valorian vessel had been eliminated. The lunar garrison was no more. Cole leaned back in her chair and let out a long breath. "We did it," she said, almost unable to believe it. We actually did it. Victoria allowed herself a small smile. This is just the beginning. Signal Earth. Tell them the moon is clear. It's time to liberate our planet. On the ground, resistance forces had been waiting for this moment. Colonel Morrison led the assault on the Denver fortress, charging through the gates with thousands of soldiers behind him. The Valorians inside fought hard, but they were cut off from reinforcement and supplies. For the first time, they were the ones who were outnumbered. Similar attacks were happening at every Valorian stronghold around the world. In Paris, a resistance army broke through the walls of the fortress that had stood on the ruins of the Eiffel Tower. In Beijing, human soldiers stormed a complex that the aliens had believed impregnable. In Cairo, in Sydney, in Moscow, in dozens of cities across the globe, the same story played out. The Valorians had never faced anything like this. They had conquered hundreds of species, and all of them had eventually surrendered. None of them had fought back with such ferocity. None of them had been willing to die in such numbers just to take a few enemies with them. Lieutenant Matthew Brooks fought beside Morrison in the Denver assault. He was just 23 years old, a former college student who had joined the resistance after losing his entire family in the initial attack. Now he was a hardened soldier, skilled with both human and Valorian weapons. "They're falling back," Brooks reported, firing his rifle at a retreating alien. "I don't believe it. They're actually running." Morrison grabbed a fallen Valorian flag and ripped it apart. "They're learning what fear feels like. Let's make sure they never forget." Within 3 weeks, every Valorian fortress on Earth had fallen. Those aliens who survived were taken prisoner. Most of them were in a state of shock. In 12,000 years of conquest, no species had ever defeated them. No species had ever driven them from a world they had claimed. General Grant addressed the United Forces in a broadcast that reached every corner of the planet. "Today we have reclaimed our home," she said. "Today we have proven that humanity will not be conquered, will not be enslaved, will not go quietly into the darkness." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But our work is not finished. The Valorian Dominion still rules thousands of worlds. They will send more ships, more soldiers. They will try to take back what we have won." She looked directly into the camera, and everyone watching felt like she was speaking to them personally. "We will not wait for them to come. We will not hide behind our defenses and hope they leave us alone. They started this war when they attacked Earth without warning. They killed 200 million of our people. Our friends, our families, our children." Her voice hardened. "Now we will finish this war. We will take the fight to their doorstep. We will show them that attacking humanity was the biggest mistake they ever made." In the ruins of Chicago, where the war had begun, people gathered in the streets to watch the broadcast. When it ended, they cheered so loudly that the sound echoed across the wasteland of broken buildings. Similar celebrations erupted around the world. Humanity had won its first victory, but as Victoria said, it was only the beginning. The tide had turned, but the ocean of war was vast. There were many more battles to fight, many more sacrifices to make, and humanity was ready for all of them. 2 years had passed since the Valorians attacked Earth. The last enemy fortress had fallen 3 months ago, and for the first time in 2 years, no alien soldiers walked on human soil. But General Victoria Grant knew that peace was only an illusion. The Dominion would return. They had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years, and they would not accept defeat so easily, unless humanity struck first. The War Council met in a facility that had been built inside a mountain in Colorado. It was larger now than it had been during the Resistance days. More nations were represented. More military leaders, more scientists. Humanity had transformed itself in 2 years. The species that had once fought among itself over borders and resources was now a single united force with one goal: survival. Admiral Patricia Stone commanded the human fleet, which had grown from 12 ships to 47. She was a former Navy officer who had led one of the first successful attacks against Valorian orbital platforms. Now she was responsible for every warship humanity possessed. "We've identified our first target," Stone said, activating the holographic display. A star system appeared in the center of the room. "This is Kepler 442, about 100 light-years from Earth. The Valorians use it as a major supply depot for their operations in this sector of the galaxy. Destroy it, and we cut off their ability to launch another attack on our homeworld." Victoria studied the display. It showed a massive space station orbited by a defensive fleet. "How many ships are guarding it?" 27 warships. More firepower than we've ever faced in a single battle. "And we have 47 ships," Colonel Morrison said. "That's almost 2-to-1 in our favor." "The numbers are misleading," Stone replied. "Their ships are still more advanced than ours in some ways. This will not be an easy fight." Victoria nodded slowly. "Nothing worth doing is ever easy. When can we launch the attack?" "The fleet can be ready in 2 weeks. Make it 1. The longer we wait, the more time they have to reinforce." Victoria looked around the room. "We've spent 2 years defending ourselves. It's time to go on offense. Time to show the Dominion that attacking Earth was the worst decision they ever made." The human fleet departed Earth on a cold December morning. 47 warships carrying over 50,000 soldiers and crew members made the jump to hyperspace, leaving their home planet behind. For many of them, it would be the last time they saw Earth. The journey to Kepler 442 took 3 days. During that time, Victoria walked through the ships, talking to the men and women who would soon be fighting for humanity's future. She found them scared but determined, tired but ready. Every single one of them had lost someone in the Valorian attack. Every single one of them wanted revenge. Captain Nathan Price commanded a ship called the Resolution. He was 40 years old, a former Air Force pilot who had learned to fly starships faster than anyone thought possible. His wife and 2 children had been in Los Angeles when the bombs fell. "Are you ready for this, Captain?" Victoria asked him. Price looked out the window at the stars streaking past. "I've been ready since the day they took my family from me," he said quietly. "I don't care if I die out here, General. I just want to hurt them. I want them to feel what we felt." Victoria understood. She carried the same fire inside her own heart. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler 442 and immediately came under attack. The Valorian defensive fleet moved to intercept, their ships faster and more maneuverable than the human vessels. But the humans had advantages of their own. Better tactics, better coordination, and a willingness to take risks that no other species would consider. The battle was chaos. Ships exploded on both sides. Debris filled the space between the fleets. Energy beams and missiles crisscrossed the darkness like deadly fireworks. Victoria watched from the bridge of the Defiance, giving orders, adjusting strategy, trying to keep her people alive while destroying as many enemies as possible. "The Resolution is taking heavy damage," an officer reported. "Captain Price's ship has lost shields and main weapons." On the view screen, Victoria could see the Resolution being pounded by 3 Valorian warships. It was dying, and everyone knew it. Then Price's voice came over the communication system. "General Grant, it's been an honor. Tell them we didn't go quietly." Before Victoria could respond, the Resolution accelerated directly toward the largest Valorian battlecruiser. The enemy tried to move out of the way, but Price was too fast. The 2 ships collided in a massive explosion that destroyed them both. The loss of their battlecruiser threw the Valorian fleet into confusion. Human ships pressed the advantage, pushing harder than ever. One by one, the enemy vessels fell. When the battle finally ended, the human fleet had lost 14 ships, but the Valorian defensive force had been completely destroyed. The supply depot hung in space, unprotected. Boarding parties stormed the station. They expected to find Valorian soldiers and supplies. They found something else entirely. Commander Cole led one of the boarding teams. She pushed through the station's corridors, weapon ready, expecting resistance at every turn. Instead, she found cells, thousands of cells, each one containing a prisoner. "General," she reported, her voice shaking, "you need to see this." The prisoners were not Valorians. They were members of other species, beings from dozens of different worlds. Some of them had been captured centuries ago. All of them had been worked nearly to death as slaves. Victoria walked through the cells, looking at the faces of the captives. They stared back at her with mixtures of fear and hope. One of them, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms, stepped forward. "Are you the ones who defeated the Valorians?" it asked in broken English. "We are," Victoria replied. "We're humans, from Earth." The alien fell to its knees. "We have prayed for someone to save us. For generations we have prayed. The Dominion has crushed every rebellion. Destroyed every resistance. We thought no one would ever stand against them." "We're standing," Victoria said. "And we're not going to stop until every slave is free." Word of the victory at Kepler 442 spread across the galaxy. So did word of the liberation of the slaves. Other species, long oppressed by the Dominion, began to take notice. They sent secret messages to Earth, offering support, offering to join the fight. Within 6 months, humanity was no longer alone. The Telvari, a species of fierce warriors who had been conquered 3,000 years ago, sent 50 ships to join the human fleet. The Kroshan, a race of engineers and scientists, provided technology that made human weapons even more powerful. Others followed. General Victoria Grant looked at the growing alliance and felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not just hope, but certainty. "They started this war thinking we were weak," she told her commanders. "Now the entire galaxy is going to show them how wrong they were." Humanity was no longer fighting alone, and together, they were going to bring the Dominion down. 5 years had passed since the Valorians attacked Earth. 5 years of war, 5 years of sacrifice, 5 years of blood and fire and death, but also 5 years of victory, 5 years of liberation, 5 years of proving that the galaxy's greatest empire could be defeated. Now it was time to end it. General Victoria Grant stood before the largest military assembly in the history of the galaxy. The meeting hall was enormous, built specifically for this moment, and it was filled with beings from a dozen different species. Humans sat beside Telvari warriors. Kroshan engineers stood next to soldiers from worlds whose names most humans could not pronounce. All of them wore the same symbol on their uniforms, a blue circle with a silver star in the center, the mark of the Allied Liberation Fleet. 5 years ago, Victoria began, her voice carrying across the vast chamber, the Valorian Dominion came to my world. They came without warning, without mercy. They killed 200 million of my people in a single day. The hall was silent. Every being in the room knew this story. Every being had a similar story of their own. They expected us to surrender. They had conquered hundreds of species before us, and all of them had eventually bowed to the Dominion's power. But we did not bow. We did not break. We fought back with everything we had, and when that was not enough, we found more. She looked across the sea of faces, human and alien alike. Today, we are not just humans anymore. We are an alliance of free peoples, united against tyranny. Today, we end 12,000 years of Valorian rule. Today, we bring the war to their doorstep. The holographic display behind her activated, showing a planet covered in silver cities and orbiting defense platforms. Velor Prime, the heart of the Dominion, the world from which 12,000 years of conquest had been directed. "This is our target," Victoria said. "The Valorian homeworld. Defeat them here and the war is over. Fail and everything we've fought for means nothing." She paused. "I will not lie to you. This will be the hardest battle we have ever fought. Many of us will die, but I know with absolute certainty that we will win. Because we are fighting for something the Valorians have never understood. We are fighting for freedom, for justice, for the memory of everyone they have killed. She raised her fist. Today, we show them what happens when you attack Earth. Today, we show them what happens when you enslave the galaxy. Today, we show them that their time is over. The hall erupted in cheers. Humans shouted alongside aliens. Warriors from a dozen different worlds roared their approval. The sound was deafening. The Allied Liberation Fleet departed 3 days later. 800 warships, crewed by beings from across the Orion Spur, made the jump to hyperspace. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history, and it was heading straight for the heart of darkness. The journey took 1 week. Victoria spent that time reviewing battle plans, meeting with commanders, and walking through the ships to talk with the soldiers who would soon be fighting. She found them ready, eager. They had waited years for this moment. On the final night before they reached Valor Prime, Victoria sat alone in her quarters and took out the photograph of her daughter. Lisa smiled back at her, frozen forever in that moment of happiness, before everything changed. "We're almost there," Victoria whispered. "I kept my promise. We didn't give up. We never stopped fighting." She touched the photograph gently. "I hope you're proud of me." The fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Valor Prime and found the Valorian Defense Force waiting for them. Over 1,000 warships hung in orbit around the planet. More firepower than the Dominion had ever gathered in one place. The rulers of the galaxy had known this attack was coming, and they had prepared their response. A transmission came through from the Valorian flagship. A face appeared on the screen: Grand Admiral Korvax, Supreme Commander of the Dominion military. He was old for a Valorian, his gray skin marked with scars from centuries of warfare. "This is Grand Admiral Korvax of the Valorian Dominion," he announced. "Your attack is futile. We have more ships than you, better weapons, greater experience. Surrender now, and we will grant you quick deaths." Victoria looked at the screen and felt the same cold anger that had burned inside her since the day Chicago fell. "This is General Victoria Grant of Earth," she replied. 5 years ago, your Dominion attacked my world without provocation. You killed 200 million innocent people. You expected us to die quietly." Her voice grew harder. "You were wrong. We did not die. We did not surrender. We grew stronger. We built an alliance that stretches across the galaxy. We freed the slaves you had imprisoned for centuries. And now, Grand Admiral, we are here." She leaned forward, and every being in the Allied fleet heard her next words. "Humanity is coming, and we do not forgive." The battle began. It lasted 3 days. 3 days of continuous combat, 3 days of explosions and death and desperate heroism. Ships died on both sides. Thousands of beings perished in the darkness between the stars. But the Allied fleet kept pushing forward, kept fighting, kept refusing to accept defeat. On the second day, Admiral Stone led a suicide charge that broke through the Valorian defensive line. Her ship was destroyed, but the gap she created allowed 100 Allied vessels to reach the orbital defense platforms. On the third day, the Valorian flagship fell. Grand Admiral Korvax died when his ship exploded under the combined fire of 30 Allied warships. By sunset on that third day, it was over. The Valorian defense fleet had been annihilated. The orbital platforms were burning wreckage, and the Allied Liberation Fleet hung in orbit above a conquered world. Victoria stood on the bridge of the Defiance, looking down at Valor Prime. 12,000 years of tyranny had ended. The Dominion was finished. Commander Cole stood beside her. Both of them were exhausted, covered in the dust and dirt of battle, but both of them were smiling. "We did it," Cole said. "We actually did it." Yes, Victoria replied. We did. In the days that followed, the Valorian government surrendered unconditionally. The slaves on every Dominion world were freed. The empire that had terrorized the galaxy for 12,000 years crumbled into dust. Victoria attended the victory celebration, but she did not stay long. She found a quiet observation deck and stood alone, looking at the stars. Admiral Stone was gone. So were thousands of others who had died in the final battle. But their sacrifice had meant something. They had freed the galaxy. Cole found her there an hour later. "What happens now, General?" she asked. Victoria thought about the question. Humanity had gone from a single wounded planet to the leaders of a galactic alliance in 5 years. They had transformed suffering into strength, grief into determination. They had proven that the measure of a species was not in its technology or its power, but in its refusal to accept defeat. "Now we rebuild," she said, "all of us, together. We create something better than what the Dominion built. We make sure no one ever suffers what Earth suffered. And if someone tries..." Victoria turned to face her, and in her eyes was the same fire that had burned since the day the sky over Chicago turned to ash. "Then they will learn the same lesson the Valorians did. You do not attack Earth, because if you do, humanity will come for you, and we will never, ever stop." She looked back at the stars, at the galaxy that was now free because humans had refused to surrender. The war was over, but the legend of humanity was just beginning.